Welcome to Parent Coaches Unleashed, the podcast where we dive into the highs, lows, and did that really just happen moment of parenting teens and young adults. We're Carrie and Jessica, parent coaches, mythbusters, and occasional referees in the battle of hormones versus common sense.
If you've ever wondered, is this just happening to me? You're not alone. We are here to help you with real talk, expert advice, and hopefully a few laughs along the way. Need more support? We also offer private coaching, workshops, and speaking engagements because sometimes even parents don't have all the answers.
So continue listening as we tackle this parenting journey together.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Parent Coaches Unleashed. Hi, Carrie.
Good morning.
So, something Carrie and I have been hearing a lot about from both clients and listeners. Parents are making the statement, I would rather my child have a drink than smoke weed. Or the opposite, I would rather my child smoke weed than have a drink. And I think they're missing the point of how detrimental both of those substances can be to a developing brain. So, as always, Carrie and I went in search of someone who can provide some insight and some expertise into this subject matter. So, I'm going to let Carrie take over and introduce today's guest.
Today we're welcoming Keesha Scott. She both has personal and professional experience in behavioral and mental health. Keesha Scott has a master's degree in psychology and is the co-founder of Guardian Recovery, a behavioral health company specializing in mental health and substance use treatment. She leads the organization's adolescent program, focusing on supporting youth and families through evidence-based care. With 3 years of sobriety, she is an active member of the local AA community and a passionate advocate for women's health. As a writer and speaker, she brings both professional expertise and lived experience to her work, offering compassionate insight into parenting, recovery, and mental wellness. And most importantly, she is the mom of twin. Are they still 18 or have they turned 19?
They're 18.
18-year-olds. So welcome, Keesha. We are so excited to have you here with us today.
Hi, Keesha.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Wow, 23 years of sobriety. That's pretty impressive. I think what comes to mind first for me is, did your kids grow up knowing that you were sober, and did you share your background with them?
Yeah, so that's an interesting story. I'm actually a mother of 3. I have 18-year-old twins, and I also have an 11-year-old.
Sorry, did not mean to forget the little one.
Oh, don't worry. He's quite a force. He can't be forgotten. So I wasn't super open with my twins. My first husband died of a drug overdose when they were 3. And I was, I think, just a little timid around the subject in general. So I was not very open with them. When they were around, I would say 15, and they started to dabble in like typical teenage experimentation, I would hear so often, Mom, you just don't get it. Everyone's doing it. And I realized at that time I wasn't really sharing the best trick I had up my sleeve, which was really my own sobriety, because nobody knew more than me what it was like to be in a room full of people doing something that I couldn't engage in. And so at that time, I decided to share with them my sobriety journey. And I took them to receive my 20-year medallion in AA. I lined all 3 of them up in the front row, and they cried their eyes out, like connected to the meeting. And so from then on, it was pretty open, and it's really been probably my best parenting tool.
When you told them, were they shocked? What was their reaction when you told them?
So I had always said, I don't drink. I would say things like I'm allergic to alcohol, or, it's just not good for me. And I made that decision a long time ago. So they weren't, super surprised, but I went into more details around how I quit drinking, that I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we're a sober household, and that every year I pick up a medallion to, celebrate this, healthy decision that I made. So they weren't super surprised, but just more curious about the details. And at the time, my teenagers were really in teenage world and probably thought it was a little bit weird, to be honest.
Mhm. Yeah. And did you ever share with them
Sorry.
their dad's experience?
Yes, so I got very amazing guidance right out of the gate. He died when they were 3, and I was always told to give age-appropriate information. So he died of a drug overdose, which medically really looked like his heart stopping. So when he was younger, we talked about the heart. And as they got older and it was more age-appropriate, I delivered more information as the years went on. So they did know by that time he had died of a drug overdose. So I was able to share with them too, there's no guide on how to do this. And I didn't want them to grow up fearful around me relapsing. So yes, they certainly know the details of that.
I am curious because I have addiction in my family as well. My brother was a gambling addict. And as my kids started to become teenagers, we would have open conversations about addiction
Mhm.
and what that might look like for them. How has that shown up for your teens as they've grown and developed? Do you think it is has changed the way they've experimented, or do you think it's always in the back of their mind?
I would say, I mean, I've been very open with them that, genetics accounts for about 40 to 60% of a person's risk of addiction. So certainly I've parented from that place, probably to a fault a bit, just a little bit out of fear. I've been very open with them about that. I do think it's in the back of their mind. Unfortunately, I don't think it has interrupted their efforts to try stuff. I wish I could say that it did, but I really don't think so. But I've been so open with them that I think I've created a safe space for them to talk and ask questions. They bring their friends to me over the years all the time with questions, or this one's gotten in this trouble, or what do I think about this? So I think it's opened a very healthy dialogue, but I do not think it kept them from experimenting.
Hmm.
Right, because they probably do not have the ability as a young adult to understand, right? Like what that really means for
Mhm.
them. They're still in the naive, oh, that can't happen to me,
Mhm.
or that's not going to be my situation, because their brains don't allow them to even process like that.
Well, and
Um,
also people look at drug addiction. It sounds kind of dark and dirty. The reality is, drug addicts, recovering drug addicts, look much like we do. You know, so I think especially young people think, well, I'm not going to take it to that extreme. My husband always describes it really well. He always says, no drug addict today hoped that when they got older, they'd be a drug addict when they tried marijuana for the first time. People get into this thing of experimentation, and you don't know if you are genetically predisposed or if you're going to have an addiction. So you don't really know until you're already in if you're able to get out or not. So that's the risk.
and how important is that message right there? How important is that for us as parents to share that with our children at a certain age? And what is the appropriate age that we should start saying that exact message? Because I think that's a key message to share.
I believe, and in my house, I think when you're going into middle school, you have to start having different conversations. There's a lot that happens at the middle school lunch table. And if your
Sure.
kids haven't heard some stuff from you, they're going to hear it at school. My younger son is going to middle school this year. So we are starting to talk this summer about vaping and what that looks like, how to prepare yourself for, peer pressure and being around something that you're uncomfortable with. So certainly, the genetic component, I think, is like it's a little bit of a harder thing to grasp at that young age. But I start talking to them pretty young. Like my 11-year-old knows about genetics, how it plays a role, and then we start talking about warning signs and also about what to do when someone asks you. So I role play with them on ways to say no, because a lot of times you just get caught with your pants down. You haven't prepared for this. You didn't know that somebody was going to offer you a vape in the bathroom in 7th grade.
Sure.
So
Can you share some of those with us? I think that's a great tool for parents to have with their kids. How can you teach your child to say no?
yeah, I mean, my coaching is a bit unfiltered, but I'll just say
That's okay. Just go.
Yes.
We don't care about
I generally always tell my kids that to let me be the bad guy. And I told my son, listen, there's nicotine tests. I don't know if you know that, but I have them. I show them to him. And I say, if somebody offers you a vape, you just say, look, my mom is fucking crazy. Like, she will definitely figure this out. So I would love to, but I can't. And with my big kids, the same thing with drinking or drugs or whatever. I always encourage them to just blame it on me. And anytime my kids have friends over, I'm very outspoken about the fact that we drug test. And, I try to give them a way out if possible.
Yeah. And I would share with my kids the line I told them to say is when someone offers you something and you don't want to say no, you say, I'm good.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm good.
Yeah.
Like instead of no, or, just a little
Yeah.
bit trying to bring some confidence in it because I'm
Yes.
good. They don't know what that means.
Yep.
Do you already have something? Are you not so
Right.
I'm good.
So many kids try it
Not
for
that
the
that
first
always
time.
works, but
Yes, so many kids try it for the first time because they're nervous and they
right.
don't know what to do or how to say no. So if you can prepare them for that first time, the second and 50th time gets much easier.
Do you feel like it's easier this time around with your 11-year-old than it was with your twins?
Easier. Well,
Or do you feel more
that's
comfortable? Do you feel like you're more prepared?
I mean, that's a
Not
loaded question. Sometimes I feel
yeah,
like I just finished
a lot out.
yeah, sometimes I feel like I just finished a marathon and I got to the end and then they just coached me back to the beginning and I'm like
There
not
you go
really
again.
interested in going again.
you
But
get a do over.
yeah, so that's why it's loaded, because there are parts of it that are amazing. There are parts of it that I'm going to do different. I'm going to hold off on the cell phone much longer. I'm more confident. I'm more stable as a woman. I'm more grounded. So he will reap all of those benefits. But the reality is teenagers are difficult. This time in a person's life is difficult, and genetics can't be outparented. So, some of it is, you can do everything you can do and prepare them as much as you can prepare them. But if they're going to face addiction, it's going to be rowdy. I mean, I'm the product of an amazing family with 2 loving parents that have been together since they were 16, 3 successful brothers, and I'm an alcoholic. So, some of it you can't predict and outrun.
All right. So if parents should find themselves in that situation now, right? They didn't expect it.
Mm-hmm.
They communicated with their teenagers or young adults, and then they find themselves with one of their children struggling, needing assistance. What guidance can you provide to parents, or what can they then do? Where can they go for help?
Sure. One of the reasons that I founded the adolescent program at Guardian is because when my daughter was struggling around 14, I didn't really know what to do. And that is a wild aid experience, to know how to help a lot of people and not know how to help the people that live at your house.
Mm.
So I really started finding resources. And so my advice would be to stop at nothing to find the right and effective resource, because sometimes you get pointed in a direction and then you're in it, and then your motherly instincts tell you this really isn't the right direction. You have to stop at nothing to find out, what direction is going to help your kid, because ultimately there are professionals, and sometimes it's not one, sometimes it takes a team.
Mhm.
What are you seeing in terms of our teen population now, in terms of, are things starting younger? Do you see more alcohol abuse than drug abuse? Do you see a lot more mental health issues? What are you seeing in that age demographic now?
Yeah, I would say a huge rise in acute anxiety disorders. So not just stress, but full blown panic attacks, chronic avoidance, physical symptoms. And I mean, I would attribute that to, we live in a more of a perfectionist society. There's tons of academic pressure on these kids that really wasn't around when I was younger. And then, of course, the obvious social media, just the comparison culture that they live in creates so much stress and anxiety. And then that ends up in behavioral problems, substance use disorders, eating disorders, self harm. But I think the biggest rise that I see is in anxiety.
Hmm. Do you see the teens and young adults suffering from anxiety turning to substances to try to self-medicate?
Sure, sure. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, that's largely what we do, is treat substance use disorders. Um, Yes, because when you grow up and you learn to turn to drugs and alcohol as a coping mechanism, the harsh reality is that it does work, although temporarily and followed by many problems. Alcohol can turn off the angst. And so if you dabble in that young and it is coupled with anxiety, then you're going to maybe see that as a solve. And
Mhm.
too much of that, and you end up in inpatient treatment.
Tell us about the Guardian Recovery Network.
Mhm.
Um, is it one place? Is it many locations? What? Give us a little information about Guardian.
Sure. So my husband and I founded Guardian Recovery in 2008. It started with just him as a private interventionist, traveling around the country, helping treatment resistant people get into treatment. After doing that for a little while very successfully, what he realized is that oftentimes the families would hire him to get them in treatment. And then after treatment, they would call and say, "What now?" And there weren't a ton of aftercare programs at that time. So he and I started an aftercare program, and we really started helping people post treatment. Over time, that grew into detox and inpatient, and about 15 facilities around the country. And then through our own experience at home, we branched out into the adolescent space. But really, we're treating substance use disorders and mental health diagnoses.
All right. And when you say the post treatment care, is that for the client or is that for their family or both?
That really is for both. Originally, we would treat the client. So when you get out of, let's say, 30 days or 60 days of residential treatment, the family, especially if they don't have any experience, they don't know what to do next. Now treatment is more designed for longer care. So when you complete a residential program, often that program, and we certainly do this, is we'll advise you on what the next steps are. But at that time, it was very much you go inpatient and you go home. And the success rate there isn't great. So there's just a lot more aftercare options now.
And what do some of the aftercare options look like? Are they outpatient programs? Are they sober, supportive living environments? Like what are your recommendations that a family can look at or And are they in the same areas where the person did residential treatment, or should they move?
Yeah, generally we would recommend our continuum of care, which is you'd start at the top and then you would sort of travel down from residential to intensive outpatient with housing, and then to just outpatient where you would maybe return home. But it also really depends on the person and kind of what they need, because we also have virtual programs, and at Guardian you can enter at any level of care. So maybe you don't need inpatient, or maybe your kid is 15 and just tested positive for marijuana in high school, and they don't necessarily need inpatient, but maybe they would do virtual IOP to learn about substance use disorders, to educate themselves and to educate the family. So it would really depend, client specific.
Okay. All right. But you have all those
All
resources
levels of care.
available.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I remember listening to a study on substance abuse, and they mentioned how after the Vietnam War, so many people came home addicted to opioids,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they had a high success rate in helping people get and stay clean because their environment changed.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't going back to the same place where the addiction started. And you just said something that there's not a lot of success when they just return when they go. I'm sorry. Is
Hmm.
that what you said? Am
Well,
I
when you just go home with no plan, certainly you can
right?
go home. And part of, as an adolescent care director, part of my work is that when they are returning home, no matter which level of care they're coming from, that there's a plan in place so that the parents can receive them. Because if you don't, if the parents aren't healthy at home, if you haven't
Right.
thought through things like, have you removed the alcohol from your home,
Right.
you know how are you guys going to engage when she has a big outburst? What's her access going to be to her old friends that are still smoking? What's her access going to be to her cell phone? Like, if you
Right.
haven't walked through those things, the person is likely going to be unsuccessful.
Hmm.
And is that a plan that you help parents make along with the child that's in treatment, or
Yes.
is it
Yes.
okay?
Yes, and I also do some private coaching for teens and parents, and because sometimes kids and families aren't prepared to send their kids away, and sometimes it's just not appropriate. So often, you can put a behavioral contract in place, something to help the family set boundaries and help them, in holding the boundaries, which is really the hard part.
Sure.
Yeah. And I would say from our experience, I have had my oldest son has been in treatment, and the programs that we found the most helpful were the ones that had parent and family support
Mm-hmm.
and would not allow a step down from residential to an outpatient until there were plans in place. But I'll
Right.
say from personal experience, the parents, while the child or a young adult or however old they are is in treatment, the parents need to be doing work
Mm-hmm.
in parallel to the child. It's not just about sending your child somewhere to learn strategies and get healthy and then come back. The
Mm-hmm.
family has to be doing it as well, because you have enabled, or I'm going to talk about myself. I don't want to put this on other families. I don't know their dynamics, but in our situation, we enabled behaviors because we were afraid and we
Sure.
were fearful of, we didn't know what was going on with his mental health. So
Mm-hmm.
that had to change, and we had to change as much as he had to learn and accept what he needed and be able to communicate that. So I commend you guys at Guardian, because I have seen programs that aren't as strong in that area and
Mm-hmm.
others that were. And for parents, like you said, parents really need to find what works, and if you try something and it doesn't feel right, to make a switch,
Mhm.
because all programs are not the same
Mhm.
at
Very
all.
true. Very true.
And it's difficult because a lot of us want to use our health insurance,
Yep.
and that might not sometimes always be the best route where you're getting the best access to treatment. So really try your best, right, to look at all options
Mhm.
and not just go for one that the health insurance recommends. So now, can someone come and bring their teen or their young adult? Do you treat adults too? Like,
Yes,
are there adult programs?
the majority of our work is adults.
Adult, okay.
Yes, but we have
Can they come
more.
tour beforehand? Like, is it something they could come
Sure,
tour,
absolutely.
look at? Okay,
Mhm.
great.
So, my question for you, Keisha, something I'm thinking about as we're listening to this conversation unfold. If you have a teen, you've made it through middle school, you've made it through high school, you think you're coming out unscathed, they go off to college. Can you talk to us about what some red flags might be for parents to notice either substance abuse or mental health issues arising for their emerging young adult who is away at college and not where you're not seeing them on a daily basis?
Sure. I actually work with a bunch of education consultants, and that's what their job is, basically to help guide a family to treatment. And I've spoken to so many recently who say the majority of their clients now are young adults that exactly that went away to
Mhm.
college and then really fell apart. Again, I think that's the rise in anxiety. Also, our parenting culture is very intense and very
Heli
helicopter. And so then these kids get away, and I'm certainly guilty of this. Then the kids get away, and they can't really care for themselves. And especially emotionally, they're not really equipped to navigate emotions. And then you're put in an environment which is a tremendous amount of drinking, certainly, and obviously drug use. So I would say, first and foremost, use your instincts. We do have instincts that will tell you. It's a matter if you're open to listening to them, because I do think as moms sometimes, and I'm like number one offender here, I think moms sometimes just sort of want it to be the way it that we're imagining it to be,
Right,
because
right.
you know what comes along with um acknowledging somebody kind of falling apart. So I would
Cool.
say instincts number one, and then things that look different. If you have regular communication with your kid and all of a sudden they're not communicating with you, grades are always a good barometer for health and problems like that. And if there's siblings, also communicating with siblings and family, or and then I like to keep regular eyes on the situation too, if possible.
What
Right.
does
So
that mean?
a surprise visit or just seeing them more often or FaceTime.
All of the above. I mean,
Okay.
I have no shame in my game. I'll do all of the above. But I think
Yeah.
as a mom, you tap into your instincts, see the situation as much as you can, and then watch out for things that are changing.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I would say sleep, change in sleep with my son. At first,
Mhm.
um, we first noticed, right, him talking a lot about, I'm not sleeping. I'm having trouble
Mhm.
sleeping, sleeping through class, not being able to get up for class. That
Right.
that was a major sign.
Yeah, for sure. But again,
A
big
major.
changes though. If you had a kid that did well enough to go away to college and you packed him up and went there, and then all of a sudden he's missing class all the time, and that's not something you struggled with in high school, doesn't mean he or she's addicted to drugs, but it certainly probably means they're not engaging in a healthy lifestyle. And I would want to, at the very least, acknowledge that and hopefully
Mhm.
interrupt it.
I think
Um,
that's some pretty good advice. Just eyes on your kid, communication, I think those are really important factors, especially when our kids are not in front of us any longer
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
on a daily
And can
basis.
you share with us, obviously, with your personal experience with alcohol, but is there a difference today in some of the alcohol and drug use that younger people are using? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if a parent thinks that my situation when I was in high school or in college or in my young 20s, should I just expect the same thing for my child of that age? Or is there something different that we need to know?
That's a good question. I would say the obvious is that THC is way more potent. It's quadrupled since the 90s. So it's not the same marijuana weed. Well, I don't want to say you guys, it's not the same weed I was smoking. I can tell you that. And so right there, you're already going to have more problems. So the potency, and also it's not just marijuana. So there's synthetic marijuana, which leads to tremendous problems. And so the answer to that question is the drug abuse and the drugs are very different now. So that is for sure. And a lot of times people are still parenting with that old idea that they're just smoking pot. But pot
Mhm.
is not the same thing. It's literally not, it's like apples and oranges. So I think that is a pretty big problem. And as far as alcohol goes, we just lived in such a bizarre society where alcohol is so normalized. And I've always struggled a little bit with that, because as being a sober woman, I've never wanted my input or opinion to be based on the fact that I don't drink. But if you just stand back as an adult, a responsible adult, and look in on how much our society normalizes alcohol, how much adults participate in drinking with kids. Even if you look at college, let's say family week, or,
Yeah.
but even when my kids were little, they were in private school and we'd go to trunk or treat and the parents were all drinking. That is a little bit bizarre. And I
Yeah.
used to feel inadequate in that environment, like I was somehow not fitting in socially based on my choices. And as my kids got older, I came to realize that if one of us had to be odd and I was choosing not to engage in something that was unhealthy, or at the very least not great for my kids to watch, or the person who was engaging, if one of us had to be off, it was not me. And that took me many years in recovery to get to. I think the thing that I remember, one just specific story, my daughter, I think she was like 14, and they had done something like steal the car or something terrible. And I had to call her friend's parent to say she has to go home. And the woman was so drunk she couldn't come pick her up. And not that, as an adult you can get drunk as you want and it's legal and there's no judgment on that, but like, if one of us had to feel odd about ourselves, why was it me?
Yeah.
So
Right.
so it's taken me a really long time to get there, but our society is just a little off, in my opinion, in how much we allow and we expect our kids to just drink because they're teenagers. And I did the same thing. I mean, I turned a blind eye, the whole thing. But it is weird. If you really step back and just from a responsible adult perspective, it is a little bit off.
Mhm.
It's interesting you say that. I found that when our kids got to a certain age, when we were at dinner with them, we stopped having wine at
Mhm.
dinner because they were getting to an age where they were aware of everything that was going on around them, and they would be driving soon. And we kept thinking about drinking and driving, and how many times are you out socially with your friends as adults and you have wine with dinner or a cocktail, and then you drive home. And it's everything we're telling our kids not to
Not to,
do.
yeah. Yeah,
And
and I don't think you're totally avoiding it. Like I said, my kids have grown up in an alcohol-free home and
right.
have both dabbled in substances and alcohol. What I can say, as they age, now they're starting to realize I think the value of having parents that make healthy choices. So it doesn't make sense to any 15 or 16-year-old, it just
Mhm.
doesn't. But you're trying to parent the long game, and be an example of health and wellness. So if you can go and sit in front of a football game and have 2 beers with chips like my dad can, great. But being at a social event and having a few beers and then driving home, even when the kids are little, they see that, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
what are we teaching them? So to your point, I think it's so valid that when your kids are watching, just to be mindful about the choices that we make.
It's true. I mean, I also see it. I see it with weed also, with
Oh
edibles. Like
yeah.
that's become a new thing. Like kids taking their parents' edibles and parents knowing about it and being okay.
Well, that a
I
lot
don't
of that comes from because the not just are the drugs more potent, but there's a lot of drugs that are laced. And I think the parenting culture has kind of collided with this fear that your kid is going to do a drug and then it's laced and they die. So a lot
right.
of parents are thinking, I would rather give them this and know that it's safe. Um, it just gets murky, right? Because certainly the motive there is great, is well intended, and we all want our kids to be safe, and most kids will dabble only and not become addicts. But I think it's a little scary that we're eking into this culture where we're providing our kids with marijuana. I mean,
Mhm.
it's just a little bit, where does that go?
Yeah. And is it if I mean you talked about your family, right? So your parents raised children and you were the one who had a substance abuse disorder.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um for a parent giving their child their edible or buying for them just because the parent has not had an adverse reaction,
Hmm.
is that a good indicator of the child or no? Like, should the parents still be highly sensitive and aware? What I'm providing to my child could look very different than my experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so hard to say. I mean, I have some amazing friends that do that, and so I think it's a personal choice, and you're the expert in your kid. And I think when your kid is aging and going through the process, there are indicators that they could have an addictive personality. I think I would definitely be mindful about the genetic component, and if you do have addiction in your genes, I would think that I would want to lead with that, But I really, truly, as a mom, also understand somebody wanting to provide their kid with marijuana that they know is not laced in an effort to save their life, possibly. So I really get both sides of it. I won't be doing that, but I do really understand that.
What do you where do you stand when people say that, "Oh, marijuana is not addictive"?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that's just super uneducated. I can't imagine any world where somebody could prove that scientifically. Um, I think what they're talking about is probably based on their personal experience of smoking marijuana, maybe when they were younger, which again, back to the idea that it's not the same marijuana.
Mhm.
And because one person doesn't get addicted doesn't mean the other person won't get addicted. So marijuana is absolutely can be addictive. And at the very least, even if it didn't cause you major problems, if you smoke marijuana, let's say to go to bed every night and you lose the ability to fall asleep on your own, that's still not great. So I think it just boils down to your goals and your priorities and your own personal stance. But I don't think anybody would agree that marijuana is not addictive.
And do you see marijuana as a gateway drug?
Kind of. I mean, I don't think that if you met 10 drug addicts, let's say a cocaine addict, a meth addict, whatever, if you ask all of them what was the first drug you used, I bet most of them would say marijuana. I don't think that means that if you smoke marijuana, you're going to do other drugs. I just do think it's the kind of drug that comes first. I do think, and I have nothing to support this, but I do think that the earlier you smoke matters also, not only for brain development, but also it just gets you in that world earlier. And the kids that are smoking earlier may go down a rockier path. So I think all of that matters.
Yeah.
I'm kind of happy, even though our family's experience has been rocky, that my children are now 23 and 25, right?
You
At least
should be.
we're at the adult age. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy moving forward, but that we at least made it through those years of things are just seem to be getting like, right, kids are using earlier and earlier. And I mean, I don't even think I realized, as educated as I was and in tuned with what was going on with drugs and alcohol, like, I still didn't understand the differences and what it was doing and the effect it was having on my children's brain at 14 and 15. And
Right.
so
I think also the vaping culture has changed the game a lot because, when we were younger, again, I don't know if you guys dabbled in this kind of stuff, but if I smoke cigarettes, then I would have to wash my hands, wash out my mouth, spray my hair. There was so much I had to do to make it past my mom. Now vaping doesn't smell like anything. So kids have more access. There's more frequency and there's a more ability to hide it. So I think not only are they doing it probably earlier, but they can do it more frequently, which then creates the addiction. So for cigarettes, if I could only smoke on a Friday night, and then I didn't see my friends again in that capacity until the next Friday, the odds of me being addicted to nicotine were lower. But if I have a vape in my room that I can vape all the time, and I have access to Apple Pay, so I can buy another one, it's just the access is just so much bigger, and the ability to hide this stuff contributes to the frequency, which contributes to the addiction.
Oh, Carrie, I think you're right in being happy that you made it. I mean, it's scary.
I mean, and we
It
were
is.
not unscathed,
You,
right?
No,
you slid in
yeah,
home.
you have come out on the other side. You've
We are
come
still
out
a
on
work in
the
progress.
100%. Yes, but
We're
you've
still
come
a
out
work
on
in
the other
progress.
side, and it's scary. It's scary raising teenagers. And what you said, Keesha, that stuck with me is you can't outparent genetics. That's scary too.
But I will say that the flip side of that is I would say that the single most thing that's given me purpose in the world is my alcoholism. It's given me the ability to help other people, to be impactful. And if I could do it all over again, I would choose to be an alcoholic. So I think that the road to getting help is rocky, but if you can get there, the world is limitless and there's so many opportunities to be of service in the world. And really, that's where the good stuff is.
Yeah, I love that message.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to wrap this up too. I really, that is a beautiful message.
So congratulations again on 23 years.
Thank
We
you.
are
Thank you.
super grateful that you spent time with us today. If our listeners would like to reach out to you, what would be the best method?
So our website is guardianrecovery.com. And if they want to email me individually, it's Keesha, which is KEESHA.Scott at grncare.com.
Great.
All right. And we will
Thank you
make
so much
sure, to attach all of your contact information in our show notes. And that way it'll be easy for people to reach out.
Awesome.
And thank you again. And thank you everyone for listening. And remember, you can always reach out at info@parentcoachesunleashed.com. We appreciate you and thank you.
Have a good one.
Thanks, ladies.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Parent Coaches Unleashed with Carrie and Jessica. Together, we can raise the next generation of independent, capable, and compassionate young adults.
We encourage you to send us an email with questions and feedback to info@parentcoachesunleashed.com. Please remember, you are not alone on this parenting journey.